Some songs and bards' tales told of heroic deeds and great battles. Some spoke of tragedies that induced tears from every lady at court, and maybe even from a knight or two. And some, like the tale The Bear and the Maiden Fair, were uttered at court for entertainment, to draw forth a good laugh during either pleasant or somber occasions. However, in A Song of Ice and Fire, stories often mirrored reality. And though the relationship between Brienne of Tarth and Jaime Lannister reflected hints of The Bear and the Maiden Fair within itself, they also faced a much more literal predicament akin to the comical song. This conflict, involving a real bear and a maiden not so fair, proved to be a pivotal moment in the life of Ser Jaime Lannister. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Exploring Fiction. The strange relationship of the Kingslayer with the Maiden of Tarth played a prominent role in A Storm of Swords and Beyond. But its most distinct moment may have been in the depths of Harrenhal, where Bolton forces and the brave companions sat while pillaging and ruining the surrounding lands. Ser Jaime and Brienne had antagonized each other before, but slowly began to care for each other and even look out for one another. Finally, when Brienne was left behind at Harrenhal and tossed into a pit wearing a pink gown to be torn apart by a savage bear, Ser Jaime's conscience flared. At this moment, when he rode back to the destroyed castle to save someone other than himself or his sister, Jaime began to change. His redemption, or at least the beginning of it, was at hand. So, what happened during the event of The Bear and the Maiden Fair? How did Jaime Lannister change, and why? Let's explore. Grieving from the news of the apparent deaths of her sons Bran and Rickon Stark back at Winterfell, Lady Catelyn Stark seeks to cease the killing of her children. She grows so desperate that one night, with her faithful sworn sword Brienne of Tarth at her shoulder, she sneaks to the Riverrun dungeons and promises to set Ser Jaime Lannister, her son's most valuable captive, free. He will not be alone, of course. Brienne is to escort him and Sir Cleos Frey back to King's Landing, where Ser Jaime has given his word he'll in turn free Catelyn's daughters, Sansa and Arya, and send them back to her. Catelyn is at the end of her wits, as not long before, Jaime had even flippantly admitted to her that it had been he who pushed Bran out a window back at Winterfell. Jaime had been the cause of most of Catelyn's strife, but now the Lady of Winterfell was letting him out of her grasp. Before long, Jaime, with Cleos at his back and Brienne before him, is on the road. The trio evades pursuit from Robb Stark's camp and the threats of the wild countryside, but soon they stumble into the presence of the brave companions. After being ambushed on the road, during which Cleos is killed, Jaime picks up his cousin's sword and begins to duel Brienne. He has little success, and before he can yield, the bloody mummers surround them. It takes 4 of the miscreants to subdue Brienne, but only Xolo, the fat Dothraki, is needed to stop Jaime. Vaulting high the curved Arak blade of his people, Xolo chops off Jaime's sword hand at the wrist. Vargo Hoat, leader of the brave companions, orders this both as an act of vengeance on a snobbish, arrogant Lannister, but also as an act of prevention. The brave companions now purportedly serve Robb Stark, and by cutting off Jaime's hand, they seek to trouble Lord Roose Bolton, who they correctly believe is planning to switch sides in the war. Nevertheless, Brienne and the Kingslayer are hauled as captives back to Harrenhal, with the latter a changed man in more ways than one. His hand, which brought him all his skill, now hangs around his neck, and Jaime sees no path forward, or at least none worth living. However, Brienne convinces him to live, if only for revenge, and in turn Jaime saves her from assault and abuse at the hands of the Bloody Mummers. Brienne has now saved Jaime's life, and he, her honor. They arrive at Harrenhal, and soon treat with Lord Roose Bolton. The Lord of the Dreadfort is keen on sending Jaime back on his merry way, so long as the severed hand is not attributed to him. Jaime agrees, though Roose denies Brienne equal leave. She is to remain at Harrenhal as the prize of the despicable Vargo Hoat. Doubt and uncertainty follow Jaime back out onto the road toward King's Landing, and after dreaming of Brienne while resting his head on the stump of a weirwood, he demands the company turn back. Jaime leads the way, followed by Steelshanks Walton, Qyburn, and the rest, and they push back to Harrenhal. Once there, they hear a loud, raucous cheering emanating from the great pit, and when they push through the crowd of brave companions, they see inside the pit Brienne, still in her pink gown, attempting to fend off a giant black bear with naught but a tourney sword. Vargo Hoat, intent on entertaining his company of savages, has thrown his prize in to fight the great beast, and ultimately die trying. He has put together his own version of the Bear and the Maiden Fair, of course dripping with irony. Jaime, undoubtedly thinking back to only days previous when Brienne had given him back his will to live, wastes little time. He vaults down into the pit and defends the cornered woman in her awkward pink gown until Steelshanks and his men can kill the bear with their crossbows. Vargo Hoat's fun is ruined, and Ser Jaime drags Brienne to safety. Together, they renew their quest to King's Landing, the life debt settled between them. From then on, Jaime and Brienne's relationship, though unique and quite strange, blossoms into a quiet friendship. Not many others know of it, but their bond is strong. They had been through much together, including multiple life-threatening situations, forming a connection mere coincidence or conversation never could. For Brienne, this friendship marks one of the first times she feels she can truly trust a man, but for Ser Jaime Lannister, it means much more. For his entire life, Jaime had been arrogant and full of himself. Sure, he showed glimpses of a greater man when he killed his king, breaking his vows to save a city. But for that action, he was met only with scorn and mockery, and few ever heard the true story. Instead, it garnered him a poor reputation amongst the masses, as well as the nickname Kingslayer. However, none could deny Jaime's natural skill in physical activity or his charming demeanor. Even to the Starks, he seemed to be the type of man all knights and kings should look like. And on the field of battle, he possessed an even greater presence, inspiring hope in his allies and fear in his enemies. Few there were in the entire world who could match his strength, speed, and fighting prowess. As it would with almost anyone, the exceptional mixture of Jaime's characteristics seemed to have gone to his head, fueling his snide nature toward those outside his family. But his most selfish trait, one among many, was found in his relationship with Cersei. As brother and sister, they produced 3 children together, born of incestuous, bastardized lust. An act mostly reviled outside House Targaryen. The pair kept disguised their children as Robert Baratheon's offspring with Cersei. But Jaime and his sister knew the truth. His desire for his own sister drove him toward terrible action, even prompting him to push the young and curious Bran Stark out a tower window at Winterfell. When in the clutches of addiction or vice, any means seems necessary for the ends that are sought, as it was with Jaime in his relationship with Cersei. However, Jaime's time spent alongside Brienne changed him. In the great pit of Harrenhal, fending off the bear for his new Maiden Fair, Jaime begins his journey to redemption. For the first time, he fights for someone not under the Lannister banner, and not named Tywin, Tyrion, or Cersei. He becomes confused about his emotions toward Brienne. After all, not long before, he'd spent days attempting to annoy, agitate, and insult her into setting him free on the road. He was unsuccessful, and Brienne held to her code. The more time they spent together, and the more peril they went through, the more the layers of animosity between them shed themselves away. And now, in the Harrenhal pit, Jaime takes the first step away from Cersei. He saves Brienne, and brings her with to King's Landing. He has no reason or benefit for doing so, nothing to gain for risking his life for her, but he does it anyway. Before long, Jaime values Brienne over his own sister Cersei, signaling his turn away from vice and wickedness toward a new life of virtue and justice that he'd always seemed so destined to uphold. After carrying out Cersei's commands and leading Lannister forces in the Riverlands, Jaime denies his sister's cry for help in King's Landing and ultimately sets off with Brienne on what he believes is a mission to save Sansa Stark. At the start of the narrative, this action would have been unthinkable for Jaime, tossing aside his sister's pleas for the plight of the homely Brienne, and yet, here the Kingslayer stands, choosing the path of goodness at a great crossroads in his life. His first step down that path occurred at Harrenhal, where he saved Brienne in her pink gown, a maiden not so fair, from a snarling black bear. The most unique relationship in A Song of Ice and Fire could be that of Brienne of Tarth and Jaime Lannister. They began at odds, one the prisoner of the other, until they both became captives of quite contemptible men. Each saved the life of the other at numerous points, and Jaime, despite losing his sword hand and all the skill that was attached to it, was given will to live by Brienne at his lowest point. And so, when she was left behind as a prize of the brave companions at Harrenhal, Jaime could not sit idly by. For the first time defying his usual course of action, he returned to the crumbling fortress and saved Brienne from her grisly fate. At that moment, Jaime pivoted toward redemption, a story still unfolding in the narrative. The Bear and the Maiden Fair proved to be Jaime Lannister's turning point. So, that's all for this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new here. I'd love to have you. Visit my website, russellawellsauthor.com, for exclusive fiction and more. And sign up for my mailing list for free exclusive content. The links for both are in the description below. And, like always, I will see you next time.